It is a critical need of MSMEs to upscale and upgrade, which is also the subject of today's workshop. This is to transform the economic growth of not just Uttar Pradesh, but the country as a whole. The challenges, though, are not confined to UP and the UP's MSMEs, but are common to MSMEs across the country. So what do we have? 65 million workforce, 33% contribution to GDP, 50% to exports. Yes, this is a snapshot of the size and scale of MSMEs in India and their relevance to the economy. Yet, almost 95% of these continue to remain in the unorganized sector. UP perhaps has the largest number of such MSMEs. It's time we addressed this huge dichotomy and made the MSME sector more resilient and self-reliant and less vulnerable as it is in the case today. The pandemic has in fact highlighted this very starkly. So where do MSMEs stand today? Let's look at the broader picture. I'm sure the other panelists will, of course, deep dive into the specifics later on. So despite the fact that MSMEs have grit and the determination to survive against odds, with this crisis, they have been hit the hardest. Lack of infrastructure, capital and scalability, procedural impediments, inadequate access to finance, high financing costs, inflexible labor laws, and a plethora of statutory compliances have always restricted MSMEs from growing. Not only this, archaic laws and policies of the past have in fact incentivized MSMEs in India to actually stay small. There was a time when the license and inspector Raj made MSMEs shudder to scale up, wherein they would have to contend with statutory compliances such as excise duty, labor laws, licensing, and a host of others. Moreover, the small businesses are at times misguided by financial consultants to not show profits and generate cash unscrupulously, an age-old approach which in today's digital environment is fatal for any business. Tax has always been perceived to be a dirty word, which further weakens the business, as is obvious from poor balance sheets which are devoid of assets and even reserves.
I identified 6 crucial areas. One is, of course, access to finance. The second is availability of suitably skilled and affordable manpower. And of course, third is a robust business model that can sustain pandemic-like situations as we experienced. 4 is finding markets and customers to grow scale. 5 is, of course, access to Industry 4.0 tools and upgrading technology and attaining world-class standards. And 6, of course, was the compliance with various statutory and related laws related to business. And this is a very, very important aspect. So let's take the first one. We're talking about finance. It will and continues to be a challenge since banks are risk averse, and an MSME, especially in the unorganized sector, is never going to be able to fulfill the list of very cumbersome documentation and requirements, since at the start he has nothing to show for past performance. It is therefore unfortunate that there is no mentoring and accurate assessment of or hand-holding from banks with regard to the vision and business model of the promoter. Now, this is in fact something that could help become MSMEs healthier and more robust if only the financing institution would recognize the same. Now, bound by central bank guidelines, there is little or no room for lending institutions to maneuver. Here lies an opportunity for policy change. And besides this, the interest rates from the banks and NBFCs are nowhere close to being competitive if we compare them with developing economies. So how then can an Indian MSME actually compete and grow in the presence of large companies in or outside India? MSMEs need to be handled differently, and that is something we need to recognize, as their potential to grow rapidly is far more than large businesses. Number 2, I spoke about getting manpower, access to manpower with the right skills and an affordable salary. It's a huge challenge for small businesses to get the right manpower. So what the entrepreneur therefore ends up is a preference for salary over quality, since the good ones are already taken by the established businesses. He's always struggling to arrive at a consistent output, be it product or service. And that is a problem that all MSMEs face across the board. So, moreover, I mean, even any skilled person seeking a career growth opts for a larger company due to the poor image of the MSMEs. Local skill development initiatives have also never hit pay dirt, as the approach is so fragmented, and serious policy changes here are also necessary to create a bench strength of relevant and requisite manpower with the right vocational skills for small businesses. It is criminal, in fact, to have thousands of young aspiring graduates from college, engineering colleges, IITs, ITIs, etc., willing to opt for menial jobs, to survive. And ironically, while there are plenty of jobs, these young graduates are ill-equipped to take them up. And a robust skilling infrastructure is therefore critical to address this pain point. Number 3 I referred to was, how does an MSME course correct or upgrade and upscale from a struggling, to a robust and sustainable business model which can withstand situations like the pandemic. Now, the pandemic has certainly put paid to plans of erstwhile successful businesses. Who would have thought a bustling restaurant or a bar or a blockbuster multiplex, for that matter, or a flourishing tourism and hospitality business would come to a grinding halt with no resurrection in sight? So while the challenge of a new normal riddled with uncertainties will continue, we need to course correct or pivot and perhaps modify or transform the business model to be pandemic proof and therefore more versatile. And this is, of course, something the MSMEs have to learn. As was, experienced, a lot of businesses accepted the challenge, stepped back, analyzed the situation, adopted a new model also in many cases, and dovetailed with technology. I mean, that was something that actually was highlighted in this pandemic. And to be able to successfully transform a small business would actually need mentoring and financial and maybe technical support as well, which otherwise may not be available in smaller cities in India. So this is a challenge that cities in UP in particular face. So an ecosystem of easy access to transformational resources, therefore, is a must going forward. There is a wealth of human resources in the form of retired but very qualified and experienced people who would be perhaps happy to engage in some form with the government and connect with the MSME ecosystem as partners. So Wadhwani Foundation brings all of this and more on the table, I assume, as of course will be shared by Mr. Samir Sake later. So another critical and important aspect for an MSME to become competitive, and nationally and globally also, is to be efficient and productive while providing a world-class product or service. So our peers in Southeast Asia, including developing nations like Vietnam, Cambodia, Bangladesh, etc., have become successful global players only on account of this. The next point, and which is a very significant part of what MSMEs can do, is finding markets and building scale. This has always been a challenge for small businesses over decades. So obviously, traditional selling methods and practices are not helping small businesses anymore. Technology has made it possible to reach millions and billions of potential customers through national and global e-commerce platforms in very quick time. However, it is ironical that having access to data through various government portals like GST, banks, NBFCs, etc., we still do not have an authentic database of MSMEs in India identifying their products and capabilities. There would be hundreds of cases, I am very sure of that, where imports are being made predominantly from China by several users of products and services in India, only to find out much later that the same was actually already available within India. So yes, unfortunately, Indian product capabilities are grossly underexposed. So today, India has the ability to supply a very wide variety of products and services to the now very huge and lucrative Indian market as well as global markets. However, we need to let the world know what we can do. But how? I mean, that question needs to be answered, and marketing India globally should be done in mission mode. Our foreign missions and trade offices overseas should immediately, I suggest, put together a list of top 20 imported items in their region. Thereafter, Indian companies should be identified in these product categories and a serious matchmaking exercise started to make India's presence and capability felt wherever possible. At the same time, I mean, if we have an authentic MSME database, as I mentioned earlier, we could collate data of top 500 imported items into India and matchmake them with Indian companies having capability to replicate the imports. This can actually be a win-win situation. The fifth point I referred to was the key to the future of MSMEs, which will only be easy and affordable access to technology. So it is now even truer that geography is becoming history. Science fiction is actually becoming a reality. Business is happening at the speed of thought, and we cannot live in isolation because change is the only constant. So how quickly we adapt to this change is going to be the key. With Industry 4.0 standards in play, I mean, we have digital tools like AI, machine learning, IoT, robotics, AR, VR, 3D printing, etc. These are transforming businesses everywhere. So for an MSME, it's the only choice is to upgrade and upscale. Which means really that we need to adapt and adopt technologies or die a slow, painful death. For MSMEs who have seen some measure of success, they can grow and acquire technology inorganically because, as you know, good companies in developed markets are today available at very competitive valuations. And finally, the sixth point was the statutory compliance challenges for a small business. Now, being a small business owner, it has its own share of challenges because they need to recognize and understand legal and statutory compliances, which forms the foundation of any business, of course. And with an evolving economy, there are new ones coming in very frequently, as we all know. Whether it is a sole proprietorship, a partnership, a limited liability firm, or a private limited company, there are several necessary compliances to be placed prior to and after the commencement of business. This would mean compliances of Shops and Commercial Act, Gram Panchayat, Registrar of Firms, MCA, filing IT returns, GST returns, MCA, HR, and so on and so forth. A lot of time and money is invested in forming everything from payroll to attendance, along with being compliant to payment of minimum wages, to provident fund, maternity benefits. There's a long list of issues and that an MSME has to address in terms of statutory compliances. So there is therefore the dilemma of complying with these compliances. If MSMEs are to run efficiently and grow, they need to focus on their business goals rather than expend their valuable human resource, time and energy in areas that can otherwise be professionally managed through outstanding and outsourcing options. So since the promoter is not competent to fulfill statutory and legal obligations on his own, he must hire specialists like accountants, company secretaries, HR managers. If any, these personnel leave or are absent at any time, a default is most likely to happen, and there are cumbersome legal processes to be followed to resolve all these issues. So thereby consuming more valuable time, energy, and financial resources of the entrepreneur. So what then are the solutions? An ecosystem to create a pool of professionals through BPO concept, especially MSMEs would be perfect solutions wherein a promoter would outsource all the compliance work and focus on his business. So all this at a fraction of a cost he would otherwise have to pay to hire professionals. The BPO in turn would get business of multiple MSMEs and be profitable venture on its own. So it's a one window service provider which could be a win-win for all MSMEs in the ecosystem. So conclude, while MSMEs are the true engines of any economy with the ability to multiply growth rapidly, they are also the most vulnerable and risk-prone. A robust and considerate effort and support system coupled with MSME-centric policies will bring out their real potential.